So he said one time he saw a very amazing thing. It was one year when they were at Gaurumandala Parikrama, and he said that he was visiting there, his Gurudev, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, you know that balcony that he had where he used to pace back and forth, Prabhupada told us, and plan out how to, the Krishna consciousness movement, and like a warrior king. And he said so he had been out there having a darshan with all the big sannyasis, and brahmacharis were there, and he was also there. And he said that just then he finished the darshan, and he went into his room and closed the door. And everyone was still sitting out there. And he said just at that moment he noticed this very quiet grihasta coming from, the front gates and coming up, walking up towards where, in the back where the house was. And kind of looking around, and he was carrying a suitcase. Probably had just come off the train, he said. And he recognized that it was his friend, Abhay Charan Aravinda Babu, they used to call him Prabhu. And he saw him, and he was kind of looking around, and then he started to very quietly walk up the stairs. But then he saw that actually his Gurudev wasn't there, and that the darshan was over, and someone said, darshan is over. And so in a very kind of, again, non-invasive way, he just turned around and started, he went like this, gave respects to everyone, and then he started walking back down the stairs. And he walked down the stairs, and he was just walking out towards the main temple. And just at that moment, the doors flung open, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura Prabhupada was standing there. And he looked over, and he saw our Srila Prabhupada walking. And then he said, "Oh, come," like that. And everyone was kind of looking, what? And Prabhupada himself even looked. And then he saw that his Gurudev was calling him. So he came and he started walking back up the stairs. And all the sannyasis were crowded around the door. They thought maybe it was more of a darshan. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati went like this. And he kind of made a path between them all. And he called for Srila Prabhupada to come there. And then he brought him into his room, and he closed the door. And Nayananda Das Babaji, who at that time was a brahmachari, said that everyone was very amazed. Even he himself was amazed, but especially the sannyasis who were saying, well, who is he? Why is Gurudev letting him come like that? We haven't seen like that. And we want to go in the room too. And there was a little bit of muttering. But he said he noticed, and he was watching on his clock, on his watch, that he was in there for quite a period of time. Very quiet. No one said anything. And then, just after that, the door opened, and he came out. Our Srila Prabhupada came out. In a very sweet way, he paid respects to each person, like by looking them in the eye and paying respect, looked him in the eye, and then he took his suitcase, and he just quietly walked back down the stairs. Because he had seen that, then he knew that there was something special going on, so he was always keeping his eye on Srila Prabhupada. So he said that this was the last year of the parikrama, the last year that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati conducted that before he left this world. And it was the last evening, and somehow that morning, we think it was Ban Maharaj, who had come back from England. And he had come on a boat, and then he had entered in and come to Navadvip, and apparently met with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So everyone knew about it, and everybody was kind of interested in what had happened, because in those days the communications weren't so good. And so this devotee noticed that that evening when their Guru Maharaj was going to give the lecture, there was thousands and thousands of people at Champahata. They were all, first of all, there was tents everywhere. And then all the devotees and all the pilgrims were crowded close in to hear, under this big pandal, to hear the last lecture of that parikrama. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati stood up there on the podium in a very beautiful way, and he began to speak. This is from the memory of Nayananda Das Babaji. He began to speak about how much it was his deep and sincere desire that this Krishna consciousness would go across the ocean, and that it would go to the West, and it would save the world. And he began by speaking about his guru, his father, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And he began saying how he had had this vision, and how he had always told him about this vision in very clear terms, and had imposed upon him that this vision, you may have to, take on this vision. If not, I'm trying, I'm sending my books, I'm doing, but this will definitely come to pass. But, you must make it part of your sincerest service. And then he told how he had tried to do that so far, and he had sent out some disciples to London and had tried to send them with Lakshmi, and that Lakshmi had come from the blood of the Gaudiya Math, from the brahmacharis who had gone out for paisas collecting. And somehow or other, still after several attempts, it was not successful. And then he told about his mother, Bhagavati Devi, and he said, when my mother was leaving from this world, she called me to her bedside, and she gave me one order upon my head. She said, your father, he wanted very much that this Krishna consciousness would be exploding everywhere in the Western countries, that it would become so much popular in every town and village. He wanted this, and it hasn't yet come to pass, so you do it. So then he spoke out to his audience of disciples and followers, and he said, so I am beseeching you, this is the order upon my head. He said, and I'm asking each and every one of you to also make it your service as well. But then he did something very amazing. He started to scan the audience, and Nayananda Das Babaji said that he was very far on this side of the audience, but he noticed that behind him was our Srila Prabhupada, who was then still a Grihasta. And he noticed it because he had waved to him and everything. And he was behind him, though, and to the side. So he said that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati, Prabhupada started just looking in the audience very deeply like this. And then when he got over to that side, he stopped. And almost like a radar, he just started staring. And at first, Nayananda Das Babaji thought he was looking at him. And so he kind of went, and then he realized, no, it wasn't me. And he looked behind him and he saw. And he said he thinks he was maybe the only person that saw, because he knew that personality of our Srila Prabhupada. He said he saw that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's vision, his eyes, were locked with our Srila Prabhupada's in a very deep, deep glance with each other. He said it was so deep you could almost cut it. And then he said that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, Prabhupada then turned and he looked back into the center, and he said the whole front was filled with saffron and all the sannyasis and all the great preachers and everything. And he said, but he goes, I have a prediction. He said, I want to make one prediction. He said, I predict that the next one of my disciples who travels across the ocean, however long in the future that may take, that disciple, he'll bring back the whole world. Before Srila Bhakti Kamal Madhusudan Maharaj took sannyas, his name was Narottamananda Das Brahmachari, and he was well known in Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's preaching force as one of the great preachers. He was a young boy, very beautiful and very enthusiastic, and traveled all over India, used to convert whole towns and villages, to bring them to his guru. So he was well known as one of the fiery, successful preachers. So he told this memory that one time he was in Bombay, and they had a little Gaudiya Math there. Actually, Srila Prabhupada helped in establishing that in some ways, along with Srila Sridhar Maharaj. And when he used to go to Bombay, he was very active in that. And so at that time, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, Prabhupada, came for a darshan, for a visit to that little temple. And they were sitting down all together like an Ishtagosi kind of thing with the godbrothers there, the disciples. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj was there, and Narottamananda Das Babaji Maharaj was there. Several other strong preachers. I think what's his name? Bhaktisaranga Goswami Maharaj also was there. And our Srila Prabhupada as Abhay Charan Aravinda Prabhu was there. So they were talking with their Guru Maharaj, and he was again speaking about this order to go to the West. So in quite a strong way, he was saying, so I have ordered, and I want, who here will go? I'm wanting someone very strong preacher, one of our strong preachers to go. So he turned to Srila Sridhar Maharaj and he said, so, you are topmost, of our scholars and very senior. You can go to the West, you're qualified. And then in a very humble way, Srila Sridhar Maharaj explained, the exact words are written, but I don't have them, how his nature was not so much forward-going, but more, how did he say? Reserved. And also he couldn't so much understand the inflection of the Westerners and in their English, because they were used to very proper British English, and we were, like Americans, and so he wasn't sure he could do like that, and so he was just saying, I don't know if I can do like that. And then their Guru Maharaj turned to this Narottam Das Brahmachari, and he said, oh, so you go. He goes, you are a very active preacher. You have been so much success everywhere. I am hearing about this many people, taking Harinam, and so many people by your hand. So I want you to go. And so then Narottam Das Brahmachari, he began to, he fell down at his Gurudev's feet and he began to weep. And he said, oh Gurudev, please don't ask me to go. Because I'm just a little boy. I'm just so young. I'm like your son. If I had to go away to the West all by myself, I would die. I would die of missing you. I don't have the strength. It's not in my capacity to do it. He said, and then Gurudev was kind of like rubbing his head, and he said, oh, don't think like that, don't worry. He said, no, please. He goes, and if you give me that order, and I fail, then I will fall down forever. I couldn't please you. He goes, but here I know I can please you. But there I don't think. And he was weeping like a little baby. He was telling his disciple. And so then Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati was embracing him with love. And then he said, he looked up and then he looked over at across the table where our Srila Prabhupada was sitting, and he said, anyway, no worry. No one need to worry. He goes, Abhay Babu, he will do it. So that devotee remembered that very deeply, and he said he never forgot that. And so when it actually happened, he had one more realization of his Gurudev's omniscience and also of Srila Prabhupada's potency.